The thing about power is that it makes certain emotions available in forms that are nearly unrecognizable. A jealous man, when he is also the most dangerous man in the room, does not look like a jealous man. He looks like a man who has developed a sudden and principled interest in the punctuality of his household staff. He looks like a man who is asking reasonable administrative questions. He looks like a man reviewing the terms of an employment arrangement that he has, until this precise moment, never once reviewed. He does not look like a man who has just felt something move through him at the words, "I have a date tonight," something that arrived without invitation and without precedent, and absolutely without his permission. Luca Ferrante had run the most disciplined syndicate on the Eastern Seaboard for 11 years. He had survived things that were not survivable. He had made decisions that other men could not have lived with and had lived with them, quietly, without complaint, the way he did most things. He was 43 years old, and he had not, in the memory of anyone who worked for him, been caught off guard by anything. He was caught off guard by his maid, specifically by the sentence his maid said to him at 7:15 on a Tuesday evening in his kitchen in Brookline, Massachusetts, while she was putting on her coat, while he was standing at the counter reading a briefing document he was not actually reading because he had been watching her put on her coat. "Mr. Ferrante," she said, buttoning the second button, "I'll be in a little late tomorrow morning. I have a date tonight and I don't want to rush the evening." He looked at her over the top of the document. She looked back at him with the pleasant, uncomplicated expression of a woman informing her employer of a scheduling adjustment. Nothing in her face suggested she was aware of doing anything other than providing relevant information. "A date," he said. "Yes," she said, and picked up her bag, which was large and worn at one corner, and which she carried with the ease of something she'd been carrying a long time. He looked back at the document. "Fine," he said. She said goodnight and left, and Luca Ferrante stood in his kitchen in Brookline with a briefing document he was no longer even pretending to read, and felt the particular specific wrongness of an emotion he had not felt in so long he had stopped keeping its name available. He was still standing there 12 minutes later when his underboss, Carlo, came in to go over the evening's agenda and stopped in the doorway and said, "Everything all right?" "Fine," Luca said, for the second time in 12 minutes. Carlo looked at him for a moment with the careful eyes of a man who had worked for Luca Ferrante for 9 years and knew what fine meant and what it didn't. He said nothing. He put the agenda on the counter. He left. Luca looked at the agenda. He thought about a date. "Hit that like button. Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from tonight. Now let's go." Her name was Marta Susa, and she had been Luca Ferrante's housekeeper for 14 months. She was 31 years old, 5'4", and 245 pounds of Portuguese-Brazilian Cambridge woman who had come to the position through an agency recommendation following the retirement of the previous housekeeper, Mrs. Carvalho, who had managed the Brookline estate for 17 years and had left it, and Luca, in the specific bereft condition of a household that has lost the person who made it function and is not yet sure what functioning looks like without them. Marta had arrived on a Monday morning in September with a tote bag and a practical bun and the organized, unhurried manner of someone who assessed situations before acting on them. She had walked through the estate with the previous housekeeper's handover notes in one hand, and she had gone through each room with the particular quiet attention of a person taking inventory. And by the end of the first day, she had a list of 47 things that needed to be addressed, organized by urgency. She had given the list to Luca that evening without preamble and without apology, which was not how things typically went in his household, where most people prefaced things to him at considerable length. He had read the list. He had looked at her. "This is the first day," he said. "Yes," she said. "The backlog suggests the position was understaffed before Mrs. Carvalho retired. These are things she was managing alone that probably need 2 people. I can handle most of them. I'm flagging the structural ones because they need contractors." He had looked at the list again. Then he had said, "Handle it," which was the most authority he had delegated to a housekeeper in 17 years, and he had done it on the first day, which was not something he had done before, and which he had done because she had given him a 47-item list organized by urgency on the first day, and that was simply the correct response to that. She was extraordinarily good at her job. This was the first thing. She ran the household with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood systems, not the performing of domesticity, not the visible performance of cleanliness and order that certain housekeepers specialized in and that produced beautiful surfaces over disorganized interiors, but the actual engineering of a house as a machine that functioned. She knew which vendors were overcharging and renegotiated with them without being asked, with the particular calm authority of a woman who had done this many times and knew that the authority came from being correct rather than from volume. She identified a water leak in the east bathroom wall 3 weeks before it would have become a significant structural problem, because she had been in enough houses to know what a certain kind of damp smell behind a wall meant and had not ignored it. She managed the rotating security detail's meal requirements, which were considerable and frequently last-minute and involved a range of dietary restrictions that had never been formally documented, without complaint and without error. She had simply asked each man what he needed the first week, and written it down, and that had been that. She did all of this while also managing the cleaning staff and the garden contractors and the 2 vehicles and the household accounts, and she did it with the quiet economy of someone who knew where everything was because she had put everything where it was. She was also, and this was the second thing, entirely unimpressed by him. This was rarer than it sounded. Luca Ferrante moved through the world in a permanent condition of being regarded, with fear, with calculation, with the specific kind of performance that people mounted when they were in proximity to power. Even the people who liked him regarded him. Even Carlo, who had known him for 20 years, regarded him. It was simply the texture of his life, the air he breathed, so constant that he had stopped registering it. Marta Susa brought him coffee in the morning and told him the gutters needed cleaning and asked without particular deference whether he'd be home for dinner so she could plan accordingly. She moved through his house with the proprietorial ease of someone who was very good at their job and knew it, and she was respectful without being deferential and warm without being familiar, and she met his eyes when she spoke to him and did not look away first, and none of this was performative. It was simply how she was. He had noticed. He had filed the noticing in a category he labeled professionally valuable and had applied the discipline of a man who managed his interior life the way he managed everything else, which was with considerable precision. He had applied this discipline for 14 months. Then she had said, "I have a date tonight," and the category had become unavailable. He did not ask questions about the date. He was clear with himself about this. Asking questions about the date would be a thing that revealed something, and he was not prepared to reveal anything, and furthermore the date was none of his business, and he was her employer, and these facts were both true and, he discovered over the course of Tuesday evening, not particularly effective as a defense against the thing that was happening in the part of him that was not the employer. He ate dinner alone, which he always did, and it was fine, which it always was, and he told himself it was fine with slightly more frequency than usual. He counted at one point and stopped counting because the number was not one that reflected well on the discipline he had applied to this situation. He read the briefing document, eventually, in its entirety. He went to bed at 11 and lay in the dark and thought about the specific content of the date, who it was with, whether she had dressed up, whether she was the kind of person who dressed up for dates or the kind who was herself in whatever she was wearing. He thought about the way she'd said it. "I don't want to rush the evening," with the easy confidence of a woman who had decided the evening was worth not rushing, which meant she was looking forward to it, which meant she liked whoever it was. He stopped thinking about it. He thought about something else. He went to sleep. He woke up at 2:47, and for approximately 11 seconds, in the specific half-consciousness of interrupted sleep, did not know why the night felt wrong. Then he knew. He went back to sleep. She came in at 9:15 the next morning. He was in the study, which was where he was at 9:15 on Wednesday mornings, and he heard the front door and heard her moving through the entrance hall and heard the kitchen, and he applied himself to the document on his desk with the focus of a man who was not tracking the sounds of a person moving through his house. She appeared in the study doorway at 9:23 with a coffee cup and his calendar. "Morning," she said. "You have the Marchetti call at 10 and the contractors at 2 for the east bathroom." "Good morning," he said. He took the coffee. He did not look up from the document. "The gutters are done," she said. "I had them come early so they'd be finished before the Marchetti call." He looked up. "You scheduled the gutters for this morning," he said. "You have a clear morning until 10, and then a full afternoon," she said. It was the right window. He looked at her. She was in her work clothes, dark trousers, a loose top, her hair up in the practical bun. And she looked, as she always looked, entirely herself. Rested, he noted against his will. She looked rested. The date had apparently been good. "How was your evening?" he said, with the careful neutrality of a man asking a professional courtesy question. She looked at him with the direct, pleasant attention she gave everything. "Good, thank you," she said. "The restaurant was excellent. I'll be on time tomorrow." She handed him the calendar and left. He held the calendar. He looked at the study wall. He put the calendar down and picked it back up and put it down again. He thought, restaurant. He thought, excellent. He thought about the word excellent applied to an evening that had nothing to do with him, and felt the specific texture of an emotion that was beneath him and was also extremely present. He called Carlo. Carlo arrived in 20 minutes, which was standard. He came into the study and sat in the chair across the desk and looked at Luca with the careful eyes of a man who had been doing this for 9 years. "There's nothing on the agenda," Carlo said, which was an observation. "No," Luca said. A pause. "How are you?" Carlo said. "Fine," Luca said. Carlo looked at him. Then he said, "Luca," which was not a question and not a statement, but the specific deployment of a name by a man who had known someone long enough that the name alone carried the full weight of what needed saying. Luca looked at the desk. "The housekeeper has a date," he said. Carlo was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Marta?" "Yes." "A date with whom?" "I don't know." Carlo considered this with the careful neutrality of a man who was extremely aware of being on uncertain ground and was navigating it by moving very slowly. "How do you know about the date?" "She told me." "She told you?" "She told me she'd be in late because she had a date and didn't want to rush the evening." Carlo sat with this. Then he said, "And how are you with that?" "Fine," Luca said. Carlo looked at him for a long time. He had known Luca Ferrante for 20 years. He had watched him do things that required a complete absence of feeling, and had watched him make decisions that required a precision of emotion, the right feeling, in the right amount, at the right time. He had never, in 20 years, watched him be uncertain. He watched him be uncertain now, and it was remarkable, and he was not going to say so. "She's been here 14 months. Carlo said. "Yes, she's good." A pause. "Very good. The security detail talks about her cooking. Benedetti told me last week she remembered his daughter's allergy from a single mention 8 months ago." He paused. "That's the kind of thing people remember about a person." "Yes." "Luca," Carlo said, again with the name, again with the weight of it. "Do you want me to look into who she's seeing?" The response was immediate. "No." Carlo noted the immediacy. "All right. She's entitled to see whoever she likes," Luca said. "It's none of my business." "Correct," Carlo said. "I am her employer." "Correct," Carlo said. "This is a professional household, and she is a professional, and whatever she does outside of these hours is entirely her own business and has nothing to do with me." "All correct," Carlo said. Luca looked at him. "Then why does it feel like this?" Carlo was quiet for a moment. This was the moment, he understood, that required the most precision. Not what he said, but how he said it, because Luca Ferrante was not a man who could be handled, and the attempt to handle him would close the conversation, and nothing useful would come from a closed conversation. He said, "Because you haven't eaten dinner with anyone in 4 years, and she makes your coffee the way you like it before you've asked for it, and you watch her put on her coat on Tuesday evenings, and you have no idea that you do it. Luca stared at him. I don't, he said. Carlo said nothing. I don't watch her put on her coat. Carlo continued to say nothing, in the specific way of a man who has said what needed saying and is confident in it, and knows that the confidence does not require repetition. Luca sat with this for a very long time. He sat with the particular discomfort of a man who has been accurately seen doing something he had not known he was doing, which is a different and more intimate discomfort than being caught doing something you know about. He could not be angry at Carlo for seeing it, because Carlo had not been looking. Carlo had simply been in the house, and the house had been telling him things the way houses tell you things when you pay attention to them. 14 months, Luca said. Yes, Carlo said. And I didn't. No, Carlo said. That's, Luca said, and stopped. Yes, Carlo said. It is. He did not do anything with it. He was clear with himself about that too. He was her employer. She was his employee. There was an entire architecture of reasons that what Carlo had implied was not a viable direction, and he knew all of them, and they were real and they mattered, and he applied them with discipline over the following 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, she mentioned the date person twice, not to him directly, to the cleaning staff in conversations he overheard in the way you overhear things in a house you live in without intending to overhear them, which is to say, he heard them because he was always in the house and sound carried in the east wing, and there was nothing intentional about it, and he was not going to examine it beyond that. She mentioned that she'd seen him again. She mentioned that he had taken her to a place in Somerville that had very good piri-piri chicken. She said this with the warm ease of someone who is in the early stage of something and is not performing the early stage, is simply in it, and Luca, who overheard it from the hallway outside the kitchen, stood there for a moment that lasted longer than a man lingering accidentally would stand, and then he walked away and went to the gym and used the equipment with a focus that his trainer, who was there that morning, registered as unusual. The trainer said nothing. The trainer had been working with Luca Ferrante for 6 years and had survived those 6 years by knowing which observations to keep to himself. This was one of them. The 3rd week, on a Thursday, she came into the study at 5 in the afternoon with the end-of-month household accounts and set them on the desk and said, with the matter-of-fact tone she used for most things, I need to talk to you about something that isn't the accounts. He looked up. She sat in the chair across from the desk, not perching at the edge of it, not tentative, but sitting in it the way she sat in things, which was squarely and without apology. And she looked at him with the direct attention he had come to understand was simply her baseline. You've been different, she said, for about 3 weeks. I want to know if I've done something. He was very still. You haven't, he said. She looked at him steadily. Mr. Ferrante, I'm very good at this job and I intend to keep it. If I've done something that's created a problem, I need to know what it is so I can correct it. He looked at her. The late afternoon light was coming through the study windows, and it was doing something very specific to the room, to the desk between them, to her face, the round, warm face, the dark eyes, the complete absence of performance in the way she sat and looked at him. You haven't done anything wrong, he said carefully. Then what's wrong with you? She said, in the same tone, not unkindly. He held her gaze. She held his. This went on for a moment that was longer than a professional exchange required. Marta, he said. Yes. He thought about 14 months. He thought about coffee before he asked for it and 47-item lists and the gutters and the ease of her in his house, the way the house had become different since she'd been in it, not just functionally different, though it was that, but different in a way he hadn't had language for until Carlo had said, You haven't had dinner with anyone in 4 years. He thought about, I have a date tonight, and the 12 minutes he'd stood in the kitchen, and the night he'd woken up at 2:47 and known without knowing why that the night felt wrong. He thought about piri-piri chicken in Somerville. How is the person you've been seeing? He said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the honest directness she gave everything, It's been 3 dates. I like him. I don't know yet what it is. He nodded. That's good. She looked at him with those eyes that missed nothing. Is it? The question sat in the room. He looked at her for a long time. She looked back. The light was doing what it was doing, and she was sitting in the chair with the total steadiness of a woman who was asking a real question and was prepared to receive a real answer. And he understood that this was a door, not the kind you could walk back through, the kind that was simply open or closed, and that she had opened it herself, which meant she was not asking for his administrative satisfaction with her dating life. She was asking something else. He said, no, quietly, evenly, the way he said things that were true and cost something. It is not, if you want the truth of it. No. The room was very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment, that long, assessing, completely unmanageable look that she had given him on the first day when she'd handed him the 47-item list, the look that saw things as they were, rather than as they were presented. Then she said, You could have said something. You're my employee, he said. I know what I am, she said. It isn't appropriate, he said. I know that too, she said. You could have said something anyway. He looked at her. I am saying something now, he said. She sat with this. He watched her sit with it, watched her think the way she thought, which was visibly and without pretense, her face making the journey of it in real time without managing what he saw. The person in Somerville, she said finally, is very nice. I know, he said. He's not. She stopped, started again. He doesn't. She looked at the desk for a moment, then back at him. I haven't been late 3 mornings in 14 months. Last Tuesday was the first time. He was very still. That's not nothing, she said quietly. I want you to know that. I like being here. I like the work, and I like this house, and I like... She stopped again, and something moved across her face that she did not entirely manage. I have been very professional, she said, for 14 months. I know, he said, so have I. They looked at each other across the desk in the late afternoon light in the study of the Brookline estate, and what was in the room was not complicated. Not really. It was the simplest thing in the world, the oldest thing, the thing that people had been being surprised by since the beginning of time, because it arrived without permission and made itself at home and waited with considerable patience to be acknowledged. Dinner, he said after a moment. Tonight. She looked at him. I work here. I know where you work. This is your house. I'm aware of that. Luca, she said. It was the first time she had used his name. The room understood this immediately. He looked at her across the desk and felt something that had been building for 14 months, unremarked, in the category of professionally valuable, finally become its actual name. One dinner, he said, and we see. She looked at him for a very long time. She was doing the thing she did, which was thinking it through fully and honestly, and without rushing to the answer she wanted. He held the look. He did not try to influence it. He had said what was true. The rest was hers. Then she said, I need to make a phone call first. He understood what the phone call was. Of course, he said. She stood up. She picked up the household accounts from the desk because she was who she was. The job was the job, and the job continued, and she was not a person who set things down in the middle of them. And she looked at him one more time across the desk in the late afternoon light, and what was in her face was what was always in her face. Steady, warm, entirely herself, the specific, complete presence of a woman who was not behind glass, not behind performance, not at any distance from the moment she was in. The East bathroom contractors are confirmed for tomorrow at 2, she said. Good, he said, and the gutters held in the rain last week for the record. I know, he said. I noticed. Something moved in her expression. Almost a smile, the near smile he had been cataloguing for 14 months, the one that happened when she was pleased by something and was not quite performing the being pleased by it. Then she was gone, her footsteps moving through the house to wherever she made phone calls, and the study was the study again, and the light was the light, and the household accounts were on the desk. He sat in the specific quiet of a man who has said the true thing and is waiting to see what the world does with it, and found that the waiting, for once, did not feel like the wrong kind of quiet. It felt like a room with a window open. It felt like 14 months of something finally becoming its name. If this story left something in your chest, if the moment she said you could have said something and he said, "I'm saying something now," moved you somewhere quiet and real, you are not alone. There is a particular kind of love that announces itself through gutters and coffee and 47-item lists and 14 months of professionalism that is also, underneath, something else entirely. It is the slowest and the most honest kind, and when it finally says its name, the room knows. Hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss a story, and drop a comment below the moment she said his name for the very first time across that desk. What did you feel? Because some of us knew from the 47-item list.